Thank you for having me back. Tonight I'm going to talk about the Eaton Canyon progress, the recovery progress. And this was an introductory slide that Gabi had put together. So as it's been stated, I'm the natural areas biologist for LA County Parks and Rec. I've only been on the job for a year and a half. I am doing a lot of things for the parks, like documenting what kind of natural resources we have, from vegetation habitat surveys to vegetation assessments and all sorts of things that are in the works, because all this information is going into resource management plans that I'm writing for each of the natural areas. So Eaton Canyon gets one, Devil's Punch Bowl, the wildlife sanctuaries at 16 parks and counting. So it's a pretty big task, and I'm pretty stoked to report that Eaton Canyon's draft is done at a whopping 186 pages, and now she is ready for revision and review. Let's see. So let's dive in to what we're going to be covering today. Okay, I got to be mindful of the time. We're out of here at 8:45.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to just do the briefest background on fire ecology, on the role Eaton Canyon plays in this larger concept, what the conditions look like at Eaton Canyon from January to about now. I was just in the park yesterday taking update photos just for this presentation. Talk briefly about the scientific research that the park was covered in for like the first couple of months, the county's ongoing response to the recovery, and what community science might look like in the future. So, briefly, what is fire ecology? It's the study of fire's role in the natural ecosystem. This nested triangle here is the conceptual breakdown of it. In the most inner triangle, we have what makes a fire: heat, oxygen, and fuel. You have to have these three components in order for a fire to start. Once the fire has started, what keeps it going is nested within the second triangle: the weather. Did we have years of drought, or did we have two very winters followed by droughts? What's the topography? Is it flat, steep canyons, like the rugged landscape around Mount Wilson? And again, fuel. And then how the fire operates in the larger ecosystem over time. The natural fire regime is dictated by trends in climate, trends in ignition, and the vegetation landscape. And so California is Eaton Canyon, Southern California, the broader American Southwest is fire adapted. Fire has been a natural part of this space for millennia. And some highlight habitats that we can find in Eaton Canyon and in the broader area have been adapted to fire for a long time. Chaparral has waxy, thick leaves. Coastal sage-grouse bounces back super quick after a fire. And we have oak woodlands that from roots to canopy demonstrate how they are super fire adapted. And we also know that fire can act as both a destructive and regenerative force. Some plants can't germinate unless there's fire. But then look at the catastrophe at Altadena. So it's a mixed bag, fire, but it's with us. Come on, there we go. All right. So historically, fires in Southern California have been linked to two causes: lightning strikes, which are low intensity and patchy fires that result from that, and also cultural burns from the indigenous tribes. Today, our fires are caused by us or our infrastructure, and they are more frequent, they are fueled by unmanaged fuel loads, and they are more intense in their heat. And it adds up to a landscape that is very difficult to adapt to these new fire conditions. Let's talk about the ecological effects of fire. What happens to the soil? Well, if it's too hot of a blaze, the soil gets cooked, all the microbes in the soil get cooked, and the ground is sterilized. Or If it's a low intensity burn, well, then all the plant material, the organic plant material gets burned, broken down, and it becomes its elements like nitrogen and phosphorus. We essentially have fertilizer for the next round of seeds that are going to be growing in this environment. The plants also respond differently too. Some of them are fire followers, like our gorgeous phacelias and our whispering bells. Other plants, their response, like in the chaparral, is to start producing a crown spout immediately. This photo here is literally just 3 days after that first little misty rain that we had in late January. So these plants were just waiting for their opportunity to start growing. And wildlife too. I mean, if you look around Eaton Canyon today, you would see that the former nature center and the main access trail are covered in bear feces, coyote, all sorts of animals are letting it be known that they are occupying this space. The birds are singing at such loud levels, it's a glorious chorus. So while the wildfire may have cast everybody out, maybe we lost some critters who couldn't outrun the fire, but if they could outrun it, they have come back in droves. Okay, this is my favorite part. I love talking about oaks. So, like I was saying, from top to bottom, everything about an oak is designed to tolerate fire. And Eaton Canyon has many pockets of oak woodland. Uh, in 1993, we had the come on, brain, Kilauea fire. Whew. And the woodland survived at like an 80 to 90%. When we look at the oak woodland today after the Eaton fire, it is again about a 90% survival rate. So it's giving resilience. What do they have that makes them so resilient? Well, they have that super thick bark, inches thick, that acts as insulation to protect the inner cambium, the living tissue of the trees. They have deep root systems that allow them to tap into the water table, also holds moisture in the ground. Moisture is one of the most important aspects that these oaks provide in their resilience against fire. And when they do get singed or they do get burned, they have epicormic sprouts just popping up all over them as a response. It signifies that they are very stressed, but it also signifies that they still have the wherewithal to produce. Oh yeah, and I mentioned the high moisture content that is found in the wood, in the canopy, and in the soil around the roots helps guard the environments that these oaks are embedded in against fire. And so in many ways, they serve as a fire refugia. But extreme fires, super high intensity fires can kill the oak trees. If it doesn't burn them outright, the heat could kill the living wood. It could fry the soil, it could fry the mycorrhizal fungi that lives in the soil. So there's a number of things that can affect the health of these oaks after fire. And oftentimes it takes anywhere from 1 to 2 years after the fire to see the full effects of it on these trees. Some of the post-fire behaviors that we are seeing in oaks. We're seeing tons of sprouts. Almost every oak that I'm seeing out there is either either sprouting from the crown, or I'm seeing a whole bunch of little seedlings sprouting up right around now. These are photos that were just taken maybe a month or two after the fire. They leaf out from the base and the limbs stabilize the soil, the roots, the trunks, they stabilize the soil and they shade the understory. When I was doing some of my initial surveys after the fire, the oaks dropped all their leaves. And well, what did that do? That provided a layer of protection for the soil, for the organisms to start breaking down. So even in fire, they're still giving to the environment. They provide critical structure in this early successional landscape. When we see these oaks coming back, we see these islands of other plants growing up around them. They're serving like anchors, and they're holding all that moisture in the soil, and so it helps the other plants around them come back. If they're big, mature trees, their canopy can provide a lot of shade, lowering the temperature in these scorched landscapes. It provides habitat for wildlife to return. The insects, the birds, they are back. they support nutrient cycling through the leaf litter that's being deposited on the ground. And as I mentioned before, this matters for Eaton Canyon because 90% of these oaks survived. And so they serve as an anchor species for all the animals and other plant life in this space. And their presence largely shapes the way that we're going to manage this space post-fire. So this is an examination of what secondary succession looks like after a fire. We don't have to follow this scale religiously, but generally in the first 2 years, we see the small annual plants come back. But in our Southern California landscape, what we've also seen is that a lot of the shrubs like the toyon and the sugar bush, and who else am I thinking of? The melasma. They're all coming back. They're crown sprouting immediately. So the timetable here is scooted forward for these larger shrubs. But as the years continue on, we should see some more maturity to these plants. It's interesting to compare Eaton Canyon's immediate post-fire recovery to the Punch Bowl, which is approaching its 5-year mark, December 2020. It took 4 years up in the Punch Bowl to see the very first little sprout seedlings come out of the ground for the coulter pine and for the manzanita. Sure, these are much slower growing individuals and hasn't been a lot of water, but that's following a more conventional succession timeline than what's happening here at Eaton Canyon. I find that really fascinating. We're seeing all of the favorite fire followers popped up first, like the Mara, the Phacelia, the whispering bells, and the poppies. And we're also seeing plants pop up that we hadn't seen from before the fire. So, like I was mentioning earlier, some of these plants, they need fire to germinate, and we're seeing it. And it's amazing kind of biodiversity in this post-fire landscape. When we examine biodiversity in this landscape, we call it pyrodiversity, an examination of pyrodiversity. So let's look at Eaton Canyon. This is going to be a whirlwind photo review because I got a lot of photos and I want to show you them. Okay, brief recap. As we may know, Eaton Canyon is a 190-acre natural area. Plopped right on top of it is the Eaton Canyon open space at 82 acres, owned by the city of Pasadena. And from there, it touches the southern base of the Angeles National Forest and the San Gabriel Mountains. It's historically been shaped by a lot of natural phenomena like from fire, floods, erosion. They all play a role in shaping this landscape. And while fire may not be new here to this space, a changing climate and our influence on the landscape is greatly affecting how fire plays a role in this space. So I pulled this data from CAL FIRE. What we're looking at are the fire perimeters in the vicinity of Eaton Canyon, delineated here, from the past 110 years. Some of these fires from 1917 to 1910 aren't even named. But what I want you to pay attention to is the distribution of these perimeters. Where do we see them mostly located? People. And I intentionally excluded the Bobcat Fire. The Bobcat Fire. I intentionally excluded the Eaton Fire. There's your difference. That's why we have such devastation. We lost 9,400 structures in the fire. We lost, in addition to Eaton Canyon, we lost a number of other county parks from Farnsworth to Loma Alta to Charlesway to the golf course. Altadena, as I mentioned, lost 9,400 structures. It's been a grand total of 18 fatalities and 5 people are still unfortunately missing. This is a satellite image of Eaton Canyon from about a little over a year ago, March 2024, just to highlight some of these very broadly described habitats you can find at Eaton Canyon. Our lovely woodlands, the chaparral, our alluvial scrub through the wash, our riparian strip through the wash, and our coastal sage scrub. The next slide is going to show you what that space looks like just 3 days after the fire started, or 4 days after the fire started. Every single vegetation habitat burned at Eaton Canyon. The chaparral was reduced to the roots, though some of the more mature members of that group were burnt, scrubby kinds of things. The coastal sage scrub burnt to the roots, the alluvial all burnt, but the oak woodland remained. And the sycamores too. I didn't even mention the sycamores. They didn't survive at quite the same rate as the oak woodland, but they are also demonstrating resilience. And this is the latest satellite image I could find for Eaton Canyon currently from April 2023. And we already see, I'm gonna jump back to the previous slide just so that we get that comparison. You can see where a lot of that vegetation is already filling in. And this April footage doesn't even do justice to how green this landscape now is in late June. Okay, so what's really unique, we have a really unique opportunity here because this Eaton Fire created a rare contained example of what fire does in this landscape that is so adjacent to us. And I haven't even mentioned the floods yet, but we'll get to that. So we have this diverse array of habitats in this steep terrain. It offers itself essentially a microcosm for the broader regional trends that we're seeing. And what I think is exciting in this post-fire landscape is that we now have this natural laboratory laid before us, where it can serve as a baseline for long-term monitoring and recovery. And this transformation invites not only scientific inquiry, public engagement, a re-examining of management, but also a rethinking of how we define resilience. Oops. Okay, yeah, so let's look at those current conditions. So January 8th, the morning after the fire, it's still smoky there. Late January, you can see the hitching posts, you can see the burnt picnic structure in the background. This is after the first creek crossing, looking south. This photo here shows you how, even though we haven't had the storm surges yet, we are seeing a lot of sediment and a lot of erosion moving down these slopes. The roots have been burnt. There's nothing holding this soil in the ground. Then we had a real 1-2 punch. In February 13th, we had a massive amount of water pour into the region in an incredibly short amount of time. That's the key part. So much water was dumped in 5 minutes that the landscape couldn't handle it because the soil was hydrophobic. So instead of this water ordinarily soaking into the ground and being dispersed, it instead just rushed off the top. Since there was no roots in the ground to hold the soil in place, any loose soil went down with the storm surge, and it just created this massive block of water and sediment racing through the canyon, and it blew it wide open. I was genuinely more shocked after seeing the flood than I was the fire. And this is from February. Here we go. Yeah. This is looking west up the creek. You can see here on the far right-hand side that there are big piles of coarse woody debris, giant logs. There weren't this many logs in the wash previously. These came down the canyon. These came down the waterfalls. And there was so much water through the canyon that it was able to lift these logs up and put them over the bank to settle there. Oh, it's a video. Okay, great. I forgot that. Oops. All right. This is what it looks like yesterday. So there's the sycamores are leafing out. Some of them are bent over more than 45 degrees, but they're still hanging on and then leafing out. We see a lot of vegetation coming back onto the slopes, and we do see some plants populating the wash. This is that coarse woody debris that I was talking about that jumped the bank and is just rested there now. This is from back in February. Here's what another one of those log jams look like in the wash. And this is a lot of power. Then, literally 1 month later, We had a second storm surge rip through the canyon, not as intense, but it shifted a lot of sediment. Here we are looking at the mouth of Moist Canyon right here, which deposits a lot of sediment into the wash, giving us that alluvial fan. I stood up at the Pinecrest Gate to take this photo on March 14th to show how at the Mount Wilson Toll Road Bridge, it's all buried. The wash is buried in sediment. This photo doesn't do justice to the 10 feet of sediment that has moved into this space. Yeah, it's incredible. This is standing on the bridge looking down. This is from the middle of March, and this is from yesterday. And the wash is pretty much in the same state, even down to the location of the logs. But what we see in this photo is that the hillsides are filling out. 3 months ago? Yesterday. Okay, let's talk about some of these blowouts. It wasn't just the main wash that got widened. Coyote Canyon. This is from March 14th. The photo on the left, we're looking up into the canyon. On the right, we're looking south towards the wash. And this is from yesterday. And this is from standing on top. So it's really greening out. I mean, the space is recovering beautifully. A little further up the wash, we meet Walnut Canyon. I found it really interesting that as we moved further up the wash, there was less blowout from each of these canyons feeding into the main wash. So we do see a lot of movement here. We see a lot of disturbed soil. And 4 months later, the plants are reclaiming. This is the meadow. This is what we call the meadow. It got buried in sediment. We have our suspect towers right there for perspective. And 3 months later, it is a non-native garden. Not only that, but our trail system got completely washed away. And this is one of the reasons why it's so hazardous to occupy this space in this post-fire landscape. Everything is so incredibly unstable and is going to remain unstable until the next winter brings sufficient rain to move all this stuff further downstream. Here's another examination of what the trail looks like. Okay. This is one of the first photos that I took of the plant life coming back to the canyon. It's just starting to leaf out all the ways back at the end of January. This is taken in late February, and we can see the resiliency of the oaks. If it's hard to see, I'll point it out, but we have a lot of green. We have a lot of leafing out. It was covered in catkins. They were really making a big biological output. This is one of my favorite trees in the canyon. It's just north of the nature center. I gotta age her. I gotta bring out a DVH tape and figure out how old that tree is. But what I love about this tree so much is that it bears the scar from the Kinaloa fire. It got roasted underneath, and yet the bark healed around it, rounded out, and it healed. And so now it's gonna bear a second round, a second scar, and a second badge of honor, surviving the Eaton Fire. This is what the early day plant life looked like coming back. We have so many things. We have little baby mule fats coming back, to the Matilaha poppies, to lupins and celia, even mushrooms, and tons of mara, tons of melasma just coming back in full force, and demonstrations of the sycamores coming back too. This is a collage of some of the more recent flowers that we are observing. I want to highlight that the top row of Phacelia, plus that cutie, 7 species of Phacelia have been documented in this post-fire landscape. And before the fire, Mickey, how many was it before?
5.
All right, see that? 2 more. And what got me really excited too is that our plumbers, Mariposa lilies, showed up I mean, we have such an amazing display of biodiversity in this post-fire landscape. It's really inspiring, and I think it's really encouraging. It's a demonstration of what hope can look like physically on the landscape. This is from the middle of March, right after the second storm surge. And this is what the exact same space looks like today. Well, yesterday.
Can you go back?
Certainly. All right, yeah. So align yourself with that oak, the transmission tower. Look at that foreground. There's that same oak. There's the transmission tower. And all the sycamores are leafing out. There's lepidospartum all in the wash. The chaparral yucca is blooming and fruiting, meaning that it's being pollinated by the yucca moth, that we didn't lose them in the fire. So not only are we seeing a demonstration of resiliency and recovery from our plant life, but we're also seeing it from our wildlife. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's another individual who is showing amazing resiliency, the mustard. And it is covering the space, and it's all gone to seed too. And not only that, but it's brought all its friends back with it. So we have the castor bean, the tree tobacco, red brome, schismus, everybody's here. The spurge and the star thistle, the arundo is coming back. And I will, when I get to the county response, I'll talk about what the county is doing for this. And I had to put a spotlight on the wildlife too, as a biologist, and like without the plants coming back, you know, what would support the wildlife coming back? So just yesterday, I found that rattlesnake off the trail. We have birds and moths and scorpions, and we did a nighttime survey, and I brought a bat echo meter, something you could just plug into your phone to record the bat sounds. And we got a myotis out there. So it's very encouraging. See that what everybody who's coming back. One of the other current conditions to talk about the canyon is its closure. We have a forest closure, we have an interagency closure notice that's gone out saying that the park is going to be closed for at least 2 years. The Forest Service has already put out a closure for this year. When this year wraps up, they will put out a second closure, and we will see how long they continue to put those out. The forest closures mainly concerned from the bridge going north and towards the canyon and the waterfall. The county is determining at the very least, we're probably going to be closed for 2 years, but it's a dynamic situation. There are so many changing factors. The landscape will tell us when it's ready to come back, and the county too will tell us when it's ready to come back. So what comes next? Fire, storm surges, they've reshaped the canyon's terrain, the vegetation, the hydrology, but this is nothing new to the canyon. But what is new is this exciting opportunity to start documenting it all, establishing that baseline and going from there. I've only been with the county for 1.5 years, but I plan on being here for the next 20, 25 years. And I am very excited about documenting this for the rest of my career. What are some generalizations that we can make? You know, some species are demonstrating their resilience. They're fire followers, they're crown sprouters. Others are demonstrating that they're struggling. They just can't compete with the massive fields of mustard that are coming back. And other plants and organisms are facing challenges from this slushy, eroding landscape. It's very unstable out there. But it also dictates how we can approach our management through monitoring, restoration, and an examination of when people can come back to this space and what stewardship may look like. So, as I mentioned, Eaton Canyon serves as this phenomenal natural laboratory for us to ask questions about what this landscape looks like post-fire recovery, what larger climate trends may look like. It's great because it's this small enclosed space. It has varied habitat, varied geology, and varied elevation, and it also has accessibility. All we have to do is just walk right through the main gate once it opens. And all the research, all the data that we collect through either private investigations from universities or community science efforts will tell us what vegetation succession look like, what the soil chemistry and the erosion of this place looks like, how the wildlife is responding, and climate resilience. So I'm going to briefly summarize all the activities that have happened at the canyon. There were 4 scientific efforts that were brought to the canyon probably in the first couple of months after the fire. Caltech came down and asked if they could do a soil examination. I said yes. So what they were doing is they were taking samples of the ash to see what its chemical composition was, but they were also taking samples of the soil to see what kind of heavy metals or other kind of toxins were in there. And they were doing this as a comparison from the Eaton Canyon to the Altadena community. See what this open space looks like compared to these burned neighborhoods. Very similarly, DRI, the Desert Research Institute, headed out of Reno, Nevada, they also asked if they could come and do some soil samples. They were already in the area getting samples for the Palisades, and just the timing was perfect. I was able to facilitate them to come to the canyon and look at the soil for a different reason. The hydrophobic nature of the soil long term. Then, out of Caltech, another scientist poked his head up and asked, can I come too? He was a USGS geologist. He did a study in 2020. He did 1 soil sample at the Pinecrest Bridge 5 years ago to monitor the trends of sedimentation moving through the canyon. With tracing the isotopes in the soil, you can figure out how long the soil has been exposed to the sun, meaning how long it's been since it shifted through this canyon. And so to continue his long-term study, he took 1 soil sample underneath the bridge. And then this is a really exciting prospect here, this proposal that JPL submitted to NASA. With the way government funding looks right now, I'm not holding my breath, but this is a really exciting opportunity to examine what these oak canopies can do for us. There's anecdotal evidence, and there's also a body of literature going all the way back to the 1980s that show that these oak woodlands serve as fire refugia. The canopies are ember suppressors, and what they wanted to do was have remote sensing data, fly multispectral imaging over the canyon, over the broader San Gabriel Valley, and see what that analysis can tell us about not only the health of the canopies of oak woodlands, how much moisture they're holding, and use it as a proxy to understand how resilient they are against fire and how resilient they may be in this ever-increasing changing climate. Okay, one really interesting thing that we're doing right now is that about once a month, we're going out and doing a post-fire biodiversity study. What that looks like is a small team of us are going out and taking photos of the plants as they are coming out, as they are emerging out of the ground, and we're throwing it onto a private project on iNaturalist so that we can monitor the changing landscape over time. I love this idea because first we get to look at what early successional species look like coming back. We get to document species that we hadn't seen before, and it creates a baseline, a record of what the plant recovery looks like. This may expand into adding trail cameras. Here we are going out there and observing what the plant recovery looks like, but it'd be really cool to set up trail cameras in these canyons and see what kind of wildlife are creeping around. We already see the evidence and what they leave, the gifts they leave for us on the trail. It'd be really nice to grab a photo of them while they're doing it. And ultimately this leads into a much larger project of examining how these animals use these corridors, and leads into management implications of how we protect these wildlife corridors. Future plans look like making this data that we're collecting right now publicly available, bringing in people back to the canyon to conduct all sorts of things, from bioblitzes to vegetation habitat assessments to bird surveys. There are so many things that we get to do in this playground once it opens up. But also it presents this opportunity to like more broadly offer an educational opportunity for ourselves and the broader public. And it matters because this is really useful data that we get to collect during the closure, when the place is quiet and we have a chance to see this place recover quietly. We get to protect the vulnerable species as they come back in this very unstable environment, and it lays the groundwork for a community science for years to come. All right, another project that we're working on is to do a photo station project. There are 15 points laid out throughout Eaton Canyon where there will be a post with a little cradle for you to put your cell phone, and you'll take a photo, and that photo will go whipped over to a database. And what we'll be able to do is create a visual record of what recovery looks like in this space. But not just recovery, what long-term trends in this space looks like 5 years, 10, 20 years from now. So what we'd want to really do is these photos are situated in places that give us broad examination of what the vegetation look like, and places that are prone to a lot of erosion, a lot of movement of the sediments. What's really exciting is that once we have this big database of photos built up, we'll be able to start telling stories about what this space looks like. You know, we can use it for educational outreach, or we could use it to answer a lot of questions, long-term questions that we can't answer right now. And it makes ecological succession visible. It supports adaptive management and public education, and it creates publicly shareable record of recovery. So far, the monitoring effort is broken down into these projects. The photo station project, our iNaturalist biodiversity examination, the future trail cameras, and once the park opens, docent and volunteer planning. This is going to be a teaching landscape. We're going to have space, we're going to have outdoor classrooms available to bring the public in and talk about what we're seeing. So ultimately, this research is going to teach us a few things. It's going to teach us what the soil chemistry is like. It's going to teach us about the hydrophobic soils and explain post-fire flooding risks. Sediment sourcing connects the landscape to erosion, thanks to the USGS study. If we get to do this GPL study, we get to do an examination of oak resilience and climate refugia. And if JPL doesn't get the funding for this, I'm in talks with 2 universities whose graduate programs may be able to step in and provide their students an opportunity to answer these same questions. Ultimately, this county-led monitoring provides these grounds for long-term stewardship. So let's talk about the county response. In response to the fire, the county has broken out into these working groups, people from various departments, from like Parks and Rec to Planning to Forestry Division to County Fire. A lot of people are involved in these coordinated efforts to address these issues. The big umbrella working force here is the Natural and Cultural Resource Force. We all answer to them. And who are we? There's a team that is dedicated to the restoration of our trails. They are working furiously on the Altadena Trail, on the Altadena Crest Trail. They are utilizing the help of the LA Conservation Corps and the California Conservation Corps to get out there and put in the work. The Natural Areas Restoration Team, that's one of the teams I'm on, we're developing what the long-term recovery plan of this space looks like, what restoration looks like, and we're in collaboration with a lot of stakeholders from the tribes to docents and volunteers to experts in restoration ecology. Oh yeah, that's right. And the Community Ecology Restoration Group, they are the ones who are responsible for transforming the EQ, the Equestrian Center / the overflow parking lot, into what is going to become a landscape recovery center, where we're actually going to have a nursery and a tree grow yard on site to populate Eaton Canyon's recovery and also the broader area, the county parks and the neighborhoods. And finally, there's also an Altadena open space acquisition team where they are examining what parcels of land the county may be able to buy so that we can create essentially like buffers around our space, or connect corridors for the wildlife. And I really love that this sprouted up organically, because when you look at my resource management plan, the very first management goal is the acquisition of open spaces. So it's all coming together. There's also, I thought it'd be interesting to point out what the debris removal effort looks like. This is an angle of the nature center from the staff parking lot. This is the exact same angle. Perhaps you remember the sheltered picnic area? It is now removed. All that is remaining in place are those straw wattles to serve for erosion control. So I just wanted to talk a bit about this landscape recovery center. So you could see where it is on the map. That space has big plans. First, they're going to put a prefab office on that space so that the superintendent, Richard Smart, can come back, so that I can come back to that space, and that there's also space carved out for the docents and the volunteers who will be operating in this environment. We're going to have nursery operations. We have seeds that we want to grow on this space. We have a tree growing yard that we want to develop. We're going to have shaded areas and introduce an outdoor classroom. We're going to have a native demonstration garden and open areas for gatherings and education and contemplation. And some of this is going to be permanent. Some of this is going to be temporary. Ultimately, couple years from now, the county wants to have their own official nursery operation on a different area of land. And when that shift happens, that some of the open space that opens up in the EQ is going to turn into parking lots of additional parking for the nature center and the park. And this all may be happening as soon as at the end of this year, which is really exciting, that just a little under 1 year after the fire, we have this opportunity to come back into this space. Another thing that the county is working on is what they're calling this displaced worker program. So starting in mid-July or so, the county is going to hire about 8 to 10 people to come into Eaton Canyon every single day, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and pull weeds. They're going to be our weed mitigation crew. And so we're going to have county staff on site. We're going to have Eaton Canyon Nature Center Association docents on site, CNPS members on site to provide guidance for these crews to get them comfortable as they learn what plants they need to keep and what plants they need to pull. And this could potentially go for 3 to 5 months. So we could be looking at this effort going through December. And I'm very curious to see what 8 hours a day times 10 people for 5 months is going to look like. Let's talk about the big picture as we wrap things up here. My resource management plan. Ultimately, what it is that it's a document that serves as like a guide to the ecological restoration, to the management of the trails, the lands, the nature center, even down to what like ground maintenance can look like for the next decade or 2 or 3 even. There's a number of components to it in regards to the Eaton Fire. I had been working on this thing in 2024, and I had to recontextualize it to account for this post-fire landscape we find ourselves in. And so these are some of the changes that I made to take the fire into account. We got to do post-veg mapping. We got to do tree health assessment surveys, biological monitoring, long-term monitoring of our sensitive species. I want to see if those Mariposa lilies come back next year. We can do collaborative research with academic institutions, public use. We got to make an assessment of the trails. We got to do sediment studies, hydrology studies, see what's stable out in this landscape before people can go back out there. We're going to focus on education and interpretation first through the recovery center, and then as the park opens up and the nature center is built, we'll have more opportunity for interpretation. We're going to examine cultural and historical resources, and in this reset after the fire, we're going to have tribal voices come back to the land. I have a whole section dedicated to the potential use of traditional ecological knowledge And the county is on board, the tribes are on board. It's a very exciting opportunity that we have here. And so ultimately, the vision of this plan is to protect Eaton Canyon's biodiversity, its cultural history, and educational value while walking that fine line of allowing the public to occupy these spaces passively, recreationally, in the face of natural disasters. I think ultimately this matters because Eaton Canyon is more than a park. It's a microcosm of Southern California's fire-adapted landscapes, and it's now become a living model of what post-fire resilience can look like. It shows us how science and policy can operate in real time. One of the things about the management plan is that it is adaptive, so that as we collect new data over the years, it's going to inform how our policies operates. And also how a public agency can center both ecological and community efforts at the same time. And in the years ahead, I'm hoping that Eaton Canyon, our efforts at Eaton Canyon can serve as a guide for not only how we recover, but how we can prepare and adapt and protect these natural spaces that we all depend on. Lastly, we're just going to wrap things up here with what comes next. In the near term, we are continuing our internal biological monitoring efforts and what potential scientific coordinations may look like with academic institutions. We're finalizing and refining upcoming projects, always out of support the emerging research and habitat recovery assessments, and also what county and stakeholders will continue to guide recovery and restoration efforts. When conditions allow and the park is safe to open to the public, boy, are we going to be busy with bio blitzes and field survey opportunities. We're going to launch volunteer and docent trainings to support community science. And we can use all of this in education and interpretation. Just some really important reminders to ground this is that we say 2 years, but the situation remains dynamic. Conditions are shifting with the landscape, and we have to shift our expectations with that landscape. We have working groups within the county that are making progress in Eaton Canyon's recovery. It's very exciting that we may have this landscape recovery center in 6 months. The timelines may evolve as safety and access and restoration unfold, but county agencies, partners, docents, volunteers, and members of the community who are invested in Eaton Canyon are all essential stakeholders in this process. In closing, I think this is a moment of transformation, not just for the canyon, but also in how we care for it together. I want to do a special thanks to the CNPS for having me here tonight, for the ECNCA, and for all the docents and volunteers at Eaton Canyon, and a hearty shout out to all the partners in this journey together. Any questions? We got 5 minutes for questions. Yeah.
So when you posted the picture of the hitching post, and just I could hear my memory of the quail. Have you heard any quail or seen any quail?
I heard quail the very morning after the fire.
Wow.
Yeah, and our red-shouldered hawk that's always screaming above the canyon, screaming that same morning and screaming ever since. There's red-tailed hawks, red shoulders, kestrels, ravens. I mean, the birds are there, and it is glorious. I saw your hand go up first.
So the building has burned twice now down in the canyon. Will the new building be a demonstration of how not to have a building?
Look, you ask a fair question. Like, why would we build for a third time in the same place? So we won't be building in the exact same place where the current footprint was. There's talks about moving it to just north of the parking lot, just on the other side of that yellow gate. It's very open. So they're going to be able to create like fire zones, like a zone 0, zone 1, safety. They're going to be using fire sustainable materials. They're going to come up with all sorts of innovative ways to have like airflow through the building, use natural sources to create shade and air conditioning. So yeah, the architects that are responsible for designing the new nature center are taking all of these considerations into account, because it is a monumental task to convince the public that it makes sense to build here for a third time.
Follow up to that, you said it would be a prefab building that you will build right now, so that you can tear it apart and build something more permanent afterwards?
Right, so this landscape recovery center that's gonna be located just in the equestrian center. That's where we're gonna have this little prefab office, and that's where we're gonna have operations for the next few years until the nature center is rebuilt, and then we all move to that. But the prefab building may not go anywhere because it may serve as a future space for volunteers and docents to work out of.
And is this also made of, with all those regulations of sort of a fire safe building?
I'm gonna be honest, that is yet to be determined. It's literally in the planning right now, what kind of building they wanna use.
Okay, I have a couple of questions.
Okay, sure.
Several questions from the online community. First, Rebecca Lotta was asking, how can we get a copy of the resource management plan for
Oh.
Eaton Canyon?
Okay, sure.
Do we reach out to you?
Yes,
Okay.
please. I can share my email.
Okay.
You know, they can give me their email address and I can email that to them. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would be so grateful to have as many diverse eyes as possible look at this management plan, because everybody here has their own unique background, their own like specialties, but there's something here that unites us all, you know, our love of the San Gabriel Mountains, our love of Eaton Canyon. I've only been with the canyon, like I said, for a year and a half. How many of you have been here how many times longer have you been here? I want your voices. I want to hear your perspective in this document.
Very wonderful. There was a couple of questions about non-native species, non-native weeds, and how can individuals help with eliminating them? I guess that would be a later phase of that.
Right. So right now we're gonna have this dislocated workforce, but what we're also doing congruently is setting up a volunteer effort for folks to come in tentatively once a week to pull weeds early in the morning before it gets too hot. That is also being planned out, and as the park opens up a little bit more, we'll be able to bring more people in. We'll coordinate that effort. Yeah.
There was also mention of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Matt Ritter has already done with LiDAR that there should be some collaboration there with Altadena.
Okay, I agree. Yeah, they can reach out to me. Yeah.
There was a comment about excited for the return of tribal involvement, so thank you.
Yeah.
And then more thanks for such a detailed report, and appreciate photos and views and a request to be able to collect herbarium specimens in the canyon next spring, but that might be a little bit early, but.
That request is from one of CMPS state partners,
Okay.
Ooh.
staff partners.
Okay.
So there may be a
So
collaboration.
if they reach out to me via email, which maybe we can share somehow, I'd be more than happy to look into that, try to do some kind of collaboration. Yeah.
Thank you.
How would we find out, like, where the volunteers, like, how would we learn about when volunteering stuff would happen?
I think there will be a number of avenues, social media, also various newsletters like the CNPS newsletter, or if you're a member of the ECNCA, you can get their newsletter. And I think those will be ways that you can learn about these opportunities, but it's also being developed, what that looks like.
Is there somewhere available, maybe I just missed it, photos taken during the time it's recovering or still posted?
We do not have that set up yet, but that is, yeah, I hear you. I agree with you. We just got a brand new GIS specialist in the county. And what I would really love is to create a hub, a GIS hub, where the public has access to look at these photos in like a timeline fashion. I hate to say this, but I think a lot of the answer to these questions we have to wait and see. You know, it's only been 6 months, which is crazy because it feels like it's been lightning fast, but also standing still in quicksand. So a lot of it is just starting to get developed. It's taken months to put some of these teams together. The county knows how invested the community is in this space, and they are working their butts off to try to get people back in there in a safe and reasonable time frame.
Monrovia, 5 years.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I mean, there are some parts of the forest that took 4 to 5 years to reopen after the Bobcat fire. So that's why I think we just need to keep our expectations measured. Well, thank you, everybody. I very appreciate it. If you have any questions.